Hello! It's Em again, and today I will be talking about Japan and the Japanese culture. So, just a quick little reminder, I have been to every single one of these places, including Japan. Unlike the other countries that I have talked about, this one isn't just one city that I've been to. I went all over, Tokyo, Kyoto, all those different places around there, but we stayed on the main island, so we didn't go any other places like Kita Kyushu or anything like that. But I'm here and I'm going to talk about my wonderful trip to Japan. So, it's often stereotyped that Asian countries, specifically China, but also Japan, are very, very crowded with lots of people. And that is totally the case when you get there. And when I got there, it was like, holy crap, there's a lot of people here. And they're all Asian, which is to be expected because you're in Japan. But it's just harder for you to blend in if you don't look Asian because you can't pretend to be Asian the way that an American can pretend to be German or French or English or whatever the case may be. You just can't pretend that. So it was very crowded, but it was something you kind of got used to, except for in the underground or the subways. Um, those are the most crowded places of all. You stand on the platform and you get in, and you basically have to be very comfortable with people in your space bubble basically touching you all the time. They in Japan they even have people whose job it is to push people into the trains. So that should give you a sense of how crowded it is. Luckily, though, Japan has been innovative enough to have female only cars and student only cars because Japanese students have to take public transportation to get to school, and so during the day they don't want them with creepy pervert people who can easily touch you on a very crowded train, so they have student only cars and women only cars. So that's a very nice feature that I thought that it's not something that you would just think of when you're designing a train, but props to them. And another thing to go with the crowds is the Shibuya Crossing. And Shibuya Crossing is like the big, like, everybody's crossing, like, kind of like Times Square in New York. And it's huge. And what happens is they stop all of the traffic from every single direction, red light, like you cannot go. And people cross all at once. And it's a lot of people, more than you would expect. And you go every which direction, wherever you need to go. You know, you can go catty corner, you can go straight, you can zigzag if you so desired, and it's also really easy to lose your group members, so that's just a heads up, but nonetheless, it's actually very, very cool and very, very exciting, actually. Especially if you are taller than a lot of people because you can see a lot more. That's just how it was. A lot of the Japanese people there were shorter than I was. I'm 5'7", so I don't think I'm super tall, but maybe if you're a little bit shorter than me, you can still feel tall in Japan. One more thing to comment about the streets and crossing, there are no street signs or names in Japan. Like, if you were trying to find what street you're on, you would not know because there are no signs to tell you, oh, you're on Tokyo Avenue or whatever. Like, that doesn't exist in Japan. So you sort of have to know where, how many intersections you go across before turning. You can't really, like, get directions by street name, which is a little bit different than what we're used to in the United States. So moving away from all the crowded people, I would like to talk about the food of Japan, and a lot of people think seafood, and yes, there is a lot of seafood in Japan. Um, so much seafood, but it's different kinds, and you have more variety than what you would have in the United States, anywhere in the United States. So you have things like squid and octopus, you have, an abundance of fish, all different types of shelled creatures, lobsters, crabs, things like that. You have a lot of rice and noodles, beans, and I know when I was there, the big thing was pickled everything. The Japanese love pickled like plums, pickled seaweed, pickled everything basically. So if you're not a fan of pickled items, be aware that there will be a lot of pickled items in Japan. And the way you order food sometimes is a little bit different as well. So you have these machines that kind of look like vending machines in the United States, and you select what you want, like a vending machine. You pay for that, like a vending machine, but instead of a hot meal from a vending type machine thing, you're given this little ticket that's really, really tiny, and then you take the ticket and you go and you walk to the end of the line, into whatever establishment you're going into, and then they'll let you in. And what they do is they'll take your tickets from you, they'll seat you, and then they, go and make the food and bring it out to you. And that is an interesting concept to me, and it seems like, the process goes actually a little bit faster that way, because you don't have to spend so much time deciding what you want once you're seated, and you just kind of already know. So it goes faster, I think, and it was actually really neat and really interesting. And it's also good because it's like you know exactly what they're offering, and so you can check those machines to see if you want anything from there. Because sometimes places in the US, they'll like put out like their menu, but it's just more like, it's just better, especially the visual representation along with the words, so that's good. And another thing with food, of course, is chopsticks. Fun fact that I bet you didn't know, that Chinese chopsticks and Japanese chopsticks are actually different. I don't know the difference, honestly, but I do know that they are different from each other somehow, some way. Yes, you will have to use chopsticks if you go to Japan, and no, not for every meal. Some people, especially if you don't look native, they will give you both chopsticks and like a fork, spoon, knife kind of deal. Generally, if they give you chopsticks and their soup, they will give you a spoon, but it won't be like silverware spoon that goes with your fork kind of spoon. It's if you've ever been to like Chinese, Japanese, or Thai restaurant in the States, you'll get those little like flat bottomed bowl with a handle kind of spoons. Those are what you're given in Japan to use if you have soup of any sort. And chopsticks, I could barely use chopsticks before I went, and 2 or 3 days into the trip into Japan, I was a master at chopsticks, can pick anything up, and it's really, really simple after a while, so don't worry about that, because you will be just fine. And because you don't look like a native, people aren't more of like, why can't she use chopsticks? And especially the Japanese people, they're more reserved, and they're not gonna call you out on that kind of thing, just because they kind of know you're a tourist. So, some etiquette for the food in formal settings, there's like, I went to multiple formal dinners, and these formal dinners, like, everything is set out before you. In the States, a lot of times it'll be like, oh, you get your appetizer and your salad first, and then they take that away. And then you're given like your first course thing and you take it away, and then your second course and they take it away, and then third course and they take it away, and then dessert and they take it away. But instead it's like everything is laid out in front of you. So appetizer, first through third course, and dessert all laid out in front of you, drink included. And you might think, oh, that should be so easy to just know what's what, but not when it's all foreign food, especially seafood. If you haven't had a lot of it, and you're kind of like, what's the appetizer? What am I supposed to eat first? Can I eat this with chopstick, or am I supposed to eat it with something else? How do I eat this? Am I supposed to mix these things together? And a lot of it is like very like tiny, like little plates, little cups and bowls, and you're supposed to mix a lot of it together and you're not really sure what to do. Luckily for me and my group, our sensei was there, and she was born and raised in Japan, so she sort of, told us, oh, you could do this or this, you should eat this first and then this second, kind of thing. So that was all good and dandy. But other than the formal meals, it's not that complicated and not that scary. And I do recommend having at least one formal meal while you're in Japan. It's an experience even if you mess it up, and it's going to be wonderful, and you'll be able to talk about it later. So there's that. And something else that might be a shocker to some people, especially from the United States, is the onsen, or the hot springs. And the hot springs are like really super hot tub. Like, think of the hottest hot tub you've ever been in and multiply it by at least 10, the temperature. It's super hot, and you're in it, and you're naked with other people of the same gender, usually. And this is a communal, like, bath type area, and first you go and you're naked, so you have to take all of your clothes off, and you're only allowed a small towel that barely covers yourself up. And so you walk to this first room, which is basically, you sit down on these little stools, and you have these shower heads connected to the wall that you can take out, and you like wash yourself. And this water is really, really hot. And you're like, holy crap, this is really, really hot. But it's actually not even as hot as the hot spring itself, and it's just to get your body used to that so you don't go in there and like have a seizure and die, kind of thing. But you rinse yourself off, you can wash yourself then, but most people wash themselves after the onsen. So you wash yourself off, and then you go into the actual hot spring, and you sit there, and there's a clock on like every single wall of that room, so you know how long you've been there. It's not the kind of thing where you can spend half an hour soaking. You probably 10-15 minutes depending on your body, and you're just sitting there naked, and it's actually really, really nice. And it got rid of so much like stress, and my muscles like that were tense loosened up, and it was fabulous. It was beautiful, and it was a little bit awkward at first because my classmates and I were like, we were naked together, and it was kind of like, oh, we're naked together. But then it got really, really weird when our sensei got in with us and she was naked. Don't worry, there was lots of paperwork to sign, parental permission kind of thing, to go and be naked with people, but it's really worth it, and it's an experience, and I went multiple times. The hotels we stayed at had them, and we went like 3 times a day every time we got an opportunity to, and it was great, and it was fabulous. And if you think, ew, I'm gonna be naked with other people, no, don't let that stop you. It's 100% worth every single moment. Trust me on this one. And so I guess the last thing I want to cover about Japan would be the language. It appears to be a hard language, Japanese, but it's really not. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm actually taking Japanese. My sensei teaches me Japanese, and I plan to continue learning Japanese until I'm very close to fluent, and it's my dream to be fluent in Japanese. That's like one of my dreams. but I didn't know enough Japanese to be able to navigate and, that sort of thing on my own. And my classmates and I, who also take Japanese, together we could together we could come up with what we needed to say or what something said. And to be totally honest, a vast majority of those people speak English, like they're not just speaking Japanese. Now don't get me wrong, there's some people who only speak Japanese there, and that's totally cool and that's totally fine. But there will be people there who speak English that will be able to help you. And funny story is that, since it's so crowded in Japan, you run into people and you say, "Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry," which in Japanese is sumimasen. And you're just like, "Oh, sumimasen." But the people that run into you, they're like, "Excuse me," in English, because, again, we didn't look like native Japanese people. And it was really funny because we would use their language and they would use ours, and it was all nice and dandy. So people totally get it if you can't speak Japanese very well. They'll totally appreciate it if you try, but if you can't communicate effectively, they'll totally be able to help you out. Another thing to back up this whole thing, if you're not sure if they speak English, the Japanese there absolutely are obsessed with the American culture. I don't know why, they just are. They think Americans are so cool. Some people want to take pictures with you, they'll ask you questions, and a lot of them, a lot of schools are teaching English just because, one, it's a dominant language, and two, because they love the United States. And that's also another card up your sleeve, especially if you're from the States, because they especially love you. And Japan, dream destination for me, and I was so excited that I actually got to go. If you ever get the opportunity to go, if you're scared because you don't know the language, because you might not like the food, because of any reason, don't go. It'll be fantastic. I'll talk to you soon. Happy travels!